Right, now there's a parallel to spoken language production for the writing of speech, written expression of language. Again, this is an area that I'm quite interested in. Disorders of written word production are referred to as dysgraphia. Why? Because in order to produce correct writing, we need to use the motor system to generate a sequence of strokes that will give us an intelligible symbol that other people can recognize. You can sometimes recognize my handwriting, sometimes you cannot. But I'm trying to write words that you can recognize, decode, and generate a meaning. Now, in the case of written word production, the kind of issues that arise with spoken word production are found. So don't forget that writing, well, let's begin with speech. As I've said previously a few times, speech is a recent human skill. It's built upon the primitive mechanisms that are used for motoric function. That means all creatures have the capacity to generate motoric function as a means to survive. Speech just said, oh, the speech came along, we don't know why. Speech just appeared and made very good use of these primitive motoric devices that have been around for literally millions of years before speech came. So speech was parasitic on those cranial nerves. Then came writing, literacy. That's just 5,000 years ago. And speech had already been well and truly colonized the motor system. And literacy just did the same thing. It just colonized speech. So, not surprisingly, when it comes to reading and writing, we see a lot of parallels in the way that the brain is used. So let's begin with the premotor cortex again. The premotor cortex being the area that generates some kind of an intention. So we have the desire to produce a written word. That's sent to Broca's area for coding into a syntactic frame that's linguistically correct and will generate a written form that is legible and interpretable within the language that we are communicating. Then jumping along to the next level, we would see quite an interesting area that has been located as Area 6 by a neurologist called Exner, who argued, like Broca, that damage to Area 6 would lead to a specific problem with writing or dysgraphia. And specifically, Exner argued that damage to Area 6 would lead to problems with handwriting, so being able to generate a legible word from writing. Interestingly, Exner's argument was based on the fact that the patients he observed couldn't generate writing, but could produce the correct oral spelling of the word. So, unable to write down the word text, these patients were able to spell out T-E-X-T. So it seems something very much to do with physical act of handwriting for Exner. The planning of these different properties for handwriting also is thought to occur in this region. Just like the speech planning, a mental set for writing is thought to arise around Area 6, so that there is a frame with a plan for articulation. But of course, it's not articulation of speech, it's articulation of writing. So, once prepared, the plan for producing a written, legible text would be sent to the supplementary motor area, and the primary motor cortex would then send that information directly to the contralateral dominant hand, the right hand. So we're looking at the left hemisphere here, and most people write with the right hand, which is the contralateral hand. So that's shifting from the right hemisphere and decussating to the right hand. Finally, an area that we think is necessary for writing includes the left superior parietal lobe, which is this area up here. Why is this important? Because when writing legibly, and I don't often do a very good job with this pen, but legible writing requires visual feedback and the coordination of correct movements to produce a word that people will understand. That's a skill that's acquired. We must teach children to write. It's not a skill that occurs spontaneously. Unlike speech, which does occur spontaneously and without training, writing requires formal training. And of course, text is different across different languages and cultures, so this is rather a different visual image of a word to this. So we've got two different ways of expressing the same syllable sound, one in writing a character, one in writing a pinyin, and this type of production would require different forms of motor planning and coordination, and the visuospatial elements attached to these two are really very different. So one question becomes, what would happen in a biscriptal person who's able to write two languages? How would it work? Would it be the case that this system in the parietal lobe, which coordinates visual spatial elements, would be the same for characters and pinyin, or would it be different? That's an open question, and one that we're studying in our Laboratory for Communication Science here at the University of Hong Kong.